Is this thing working? Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it's 90 degrees outside right now. All right, it's hot. So you're inside, you're enjoying a little air conditioning. That's the perfect time to have some culinary nonsense in the kitchen. And you can do it with some comfort foods. We're going to take the calories down. We want stick to your ribs, but we don't want stick to your thighs and butt now, do we? You probably have all the ingredients you need. If not, it's a short list. Check this out. We've got breadcrumbs, some red bell pepper, a good old wholesome egg, and some tomato sauce. I think you know where we're going with this. Some of Mama's meatloaf. We're just taking a little bit of the calories out, but still putting in a lot of flavor. We'll layer that flavor coming up on Culinary Nunnsense. All right, did you go check your pantry just to see if you had some of the ingredients? Like I said, it's a short list. It's a quick hop to the grocery store, and before you know it, you're back in the AC beating some of that summertime heat. We're taking an old favorite, one of my favorites, meatloaf. We're gonna drop down the calories, so we're still gonna bring a lot of flavor, but we're going to do it in layers. And here's the secret with that. You've gotta build the bases. You've got things like tomato, which bring a lot of sweet, and this particular tomato's also got a little bit of smoke to it. Also some red bell pepper. This is also going to help to reinforce some of the sweet, but I like the colors in this, so it's also kind of like confetti. It's fun, it's pretty, and then there's the secret glazing on the top. We'll get to that, but for the layering effect, for the base, we're going to go with some caramelized onions. Really easy and a low heat on whatever your favorite pan may be. Just some chopped, and I like the sweet onions. Don't be afraid of a little bit of the extra sugar in the oh-so-sweets, or even some of the ones from up north here, just our neighbors over the border, some Valdelia onions. They caramelize a little bit quicker, so you've got to watch them, but they bring a smoky, earthy flavor, a sweetness that allows you to build on with the rest of this. All right, so here's the best part of it. Also, gravity is going to help us out in way of wicking away some of that fat. And what I'm talking about is we're not going to use the old meatloaf standby. As far as I'm concerned, this thing is great for making a loaf of bread, but as far as making meatloaf, it's a fat holder. It just traps it all inside, which then when you start to pull off your meat, the fat goes back into it. Look, fat is flavor, but also fat is fat, so if we can keep some of it, allow some of it to move away, we'll end up with a product that's slightly, I won't say healthy, it's less fat, and it's still going to have all the flavors. So let's go ahead and put this together, and it's just this easy. Starting in a bowl, I got a pound of turkey breast. You can go with the regular ground turkey. I'm going with the turkey breast because I'm also going to add some lean ground pork. This is basically a pork loin that has been ground at the butcher here in town. I've got a pound of this to a half a pound of that. So together, you got a pound and a half. The first thing we're going to add is the onion. We'll put that right on in the bowl. I like to call this a mix, flop, and then shape. The shaping part we'll get to. Basically, it's going to be a free-form meatloaf that I think it actually looks better. It has a lot more surface area, so you can put a glazing on that will help to bring another level to those layered flavors. I go easy on the breadcrumbs. This is a whole wheat breadcrumb, and I added just a little bit of sage and oregano to it. Don't go too crazy with the herbs, the oreganos, and stuff like that, or else you end up getting a meatloaf that tastes like a giant meatball. That may be a good idea for Culinary Nunnsense. Giant meatballs! But right now we're focused on meatloaf. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of breadcrumbs, just a dusting over top at first, and we'll add more as we need it. Now, because there's not a lot of fat in here, I don't have a lot of binder. To help out with that, we're going to put in an egg. Look at that, we just brought some protein to it, as well as the lecithin helping to, that would be the egg yolk, with the moisture, not to let it completely dry out. So we still end up with something that still has the juice left to it. And as I mentioned, the confetti, we want some color, so that's your red bell pepper. And then also bringing some flavor, and also to help with the caramelization, that darkened skin color that we like, the appetizing look to it that also has that depth of flavor, some tomato sauce, and this is just pureed tomato, that's all it is. I'm going to add a little bit of that, and of course, you notice I'm reserving some of this because we can all put some more in. You can't take it back out. So let's go ahead and start. Let me move my secret glaze and start to bring this all together. This is the best part about cooking here. I could probably make a decent meatloaf, or at least a meatball, some sort of consistency out of this. It holds its shape fairly well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add just a little bit more breadcrumb into the mix here and get it to where it feels a little bit drier to the hand. It's going to allow that bread to actually start to soak up some of the liquid from the tomato sauce. And what it will also do will be to help to soak up some of the liquid that's going to come out that's going to render basically out of the red bell pepper. And I think you can see the difference already, how just that little bit, now it's got a bit more shape inside the bowl. You know what, since there's only about, I don't know, a teaspoon or so left, let's go ahead and put that in there too. We did put a lot of red bell pepper in it. Like I said, this is easy. This is mix, flop, and shape. So we've mixed it, now we're gonna flop it. Boom, right onto a cookie sheet. Try to get a rimmed cookie sheet here because there will be some oil that will come out of the loaf, as well as potentially a little bit of liquid from the confetti, our red bell pepper. And how easy is this? Instead of putting it in a loaf where only the surface area, if I was to put it in here, the surface area that would be in the direct heat, not the indirect here from the glass, but the direct heat would only get caramelized on the top. Now I've got all of this extra surface layer for flavor, for that caramelization, that darkened look to it. That's just that easy. So the next step, let's pop it in the oven. And into the oven it goes. 375, I'm gonna give myself a reminder here to check and start glazing it in about 25 minutes. After about 25 minutes, we'll pull it out of the oven and put our first glazing on it. We don't want to put too much because it does have honey, some sunball peppers, as well as some mustard, and we don't want it to over caramelize. That's called carbonizing. So all we do then after we mix it up is just to put a nice thin layer across all of the outside surface here of our turkey and pork meatloaf. And back in the oven for about another 10 to 15 minutes. There she is, your turkey slash pork free-form meatloaf. After about 15 minutes with that first glazing, I brought it back out. One more glazing while it's still hot, and then I've let it rest, and that makes the glaze on the outside stick to it. And if you notice, even sitting here on a flat cutting board, you're not seeing all the juice and the ooze and everything that you sometimes get when you do a fattier cut of meat. Now, let's go ahead and do the best part here. Part of the way that we eat is, of course, with our eye. And so we want something that is appetizing. And as we pull this apart, and there you go, you can see some of the confetti that we talked about. You got your red bell pepper, you got your little flakes of caramelized onion, and you've got a whole bunch of flavor. And the flavor wraps around it, not only in the glaze, but in the layering that we put inside. I know I could keep telling you about it, but it would be better, well, if you tried it. So let's go ahead and make a plate. The steam says it's time to eat. From that lonely loaf on a cutting board to being partnered up with a couple of its best friends. You got a fresh little salad and a really easy whipped up mashed potatoes. Listen, I hope that the free-form meatloaf, even if you still make it out of meat, I hope it's inspired you to get away from the pan. Put this thing on a tray and expose it to the heat because you get the caramelization. You give it a lot more surface area for maybe a glaze that you'll put together. This mustard glaze has a little bit of spice. You can cut back on it if you're feeding it to the young kids or those that just don't like spicy food at home. Either way, I hope that it's inspired you to bring in some of the comfort food, even when it's 91.8 degrees outside right now. And I think if you start to mess with your free-form meatloaf, you too will be saying, there is none better.